tomorrow evening around 6 o'clock. And he comes back to India late evening on 2nd December. There are several engagements which he has in Argentina, and to take us through the entire summit and also the meetings, etc., which Prime Minister is going to have, his different engagements, I have with me the Foreign Secretary of India, who will brief you all on Prime Minister's visit for the G20 summit. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ravish. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to brief you on the forthcoming G20 summit in Buenos Aires. Ideally, I would have liked to have my colleague from the Department of Economic Affairs, but they are away in Buenos Aires because a number of senior official meetings are taking place. So I have to do this briefing on my own. This is a very short visit. In and out, he will be on the ground for just 48 hours in Buenos Aires. And therefore, in those 48 hours, there will be the multilateral meetings, the sessions of the G20, as well as is usual practice at international conferences and gatherings, bilateral meetings in the margins of the summit. Before I come to the specifics of the summit and the program, I just want to dwell briefly. On the significance of this particular G20 meeting. This is the 10th year. If we all recall, G20 had its first meeting in 2008 during the financial crisis. And the principal goal at that time was to deal with a global financial crisis. Since then, of course, the G20 has evolved into a much larger agenda of reforms in the international economic system, in the taxation system, issues relating to climate change, energy transition, and global economic policy and trade policy are also discussed by leaders in this meeting. So at the 10th anniversary of the G20, it is certainly our expectation that the leaders will also reflect on what has been achieved in the past 10 years and what we can look forward to in the next 10 years. The backdrop to the G20, I think, is very evident to all of you. There has been significant changes and uncertainty in the world. A number of established multilateral institutions and processes are being discussed, and in some cases reform or change is being called for. Our view is that the G20 should not become a one-issue meeting. I'm referring, of course, to the fact that there are differences in the manner in which international trade should be conducted, rules for international trade should be framed, whether reform is needed in multilateral trading institutions. And by all means, our Prime Minister looks forward to discussing these and sharing his views on them. But our view is that the G20 goes beyond a single issue and must actually cover the entire gamut of economic issues, including agriculture sector reform, including the transition in energy, including challenges that climate change poses, the healthcare problem that the world faces, and so on. So I think this is the frame of mind or the terms of reference on which certainly the delegation from India led by Prime Minister will be participating. As I said, he will be on the ground for just 48 hours, and the G20 itself consists of the leaders' retreat and 3 main sessions. The theme is building consensus for fair and sustainable development. That's a theme that has been chosen by the host this year, which is Argentina. They have the privilege to select the theme. And there are 3 sessions. The first is putting people first, and that is essentially on the global economy, on the economic outlook, on the future of work. The second session talks of building consensus, a topic of importance at this time, certainly, and this will deal with international trade, finance, taxation, sustainable development, and climate change. And the third session is called Embracing Opportunities, and these are related to energy, infrastructure, sustainable food security, and so on. The Prime Minister will be making a lead intervention in the first session. That is the session titled Putting People First. In addition, of course, he will be making subsidiary interventions, that is not as lead speaker, but as a leader who wishes to comment after the lead speakers have spoken in the other two sessions as well, which is building consensus and enhancing opportunities. Of course, the leaders retreat, all leaders are free to say what they wish, and there is no specific agenda for that purpose. Some of the points that we expect to highlight is something I'd just like to go over. Certainly, the challenges that we intend to highlight at the G20 include risks posed by oil price volatility. This is something which has directly impacted the Indian economy. It is something which affects the lives of people, and it is incumbent that leaders of the 20 largest economies reflect on both the price of oil and its availability in the market. So this is one area in which Prime Minister will speak. I might remind all of you that since the interventions are also fairly short, since a number of world leaders are speaking, the interventions will be in a very condensed form. One of the other topics that Prime Minister will dwell on is the digital revolution, and in particular how it leads to new opportunities and new forms of employment. This is a topic which fits in with the government's program of Digital India and Skills India, and this is something which I think is globally relevant at this time when we are looking at changes in the manner of global economies and of the new employment opportunities. The conference's first session by Prime Minister as one of the lead speakers will also be talking of the future of work. And with a special focus here on women's empowerment, and this is again something the Prime Minister will touch on. Obviously, he will highlight flagship programs that his government has undertaken, the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar scheme, the GST, the startups, and the Mudra Yojana, as ways of financial inclusion and efforts to reach out to the lowest rungs of society and the economy. Then, of course, I presume the G20 will discuss reforms of multilateral trading institutions, in particular the WTO. This is an issue which a number of countries are expected to bring up. And in that context, the government of India's view is that multilateralism is essential. A rules-based international order, a multilateral order is essential, but we are prepared to look at reforms in that. And the phrase that Prime Minister has used at the BRICS summit is what the Prime Minister will develop on, and that is reformed multilateralism. In other words, we cannot replace a rules-based agreed multilateral order with unilateral actions, but we can certainly look at reform of systems in the light of the new situation. In the context of commitments to the Paris Agreement and climate change, the Prime Minister, of course, will highlight the International Solar Alliance and his own vision of one world, one sun, one grid. This is the vision that the Prime Minister has outlined, and as you know, at the General Assembly meeting which was held in October, the ISA agreed that it would be expanded to include all countries, not just those between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. So certainly at the G20 meeting, Prime Minister will make the pitch for other countries which are not between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn to join in the International Solar Alliance. Prime Minister also in Hamburg had flagged another important space which we believe is yet to be filled by anybody, and this is disaster resilient infrastructure. Prime Minister has been of the view that each time a natural disaster occurs anywhere in the world, countries scramble to give immediate relief, but don't really rebuild the infrastructure back to a state where it is resilient the next time a disaster occurs. There are, of course, United Nations agencies who are doing this work. But Prime Minister feels that there is space for major countries, particularly the G20 countries, to have some kind of an informal arrangement where we can share capacity building, where we can share technical know-how, where we can share experiences immediately after a country faces a disaster which leads to significant infrastructure erosion or development, and where the immediate relief has been provided subsequently. So Government of India has circulated a concept paper to all G20 countries on this subject, and we have got very positive feedback, and I think Prime Minister will elaborate on the next steps of taking this forward. So these are some of the areas in which the Prime Minister will focus. Obviously, I do also want to mention that combating terror financing and money laundering, again, is an important issue that we will be focusing on. Now, in addition to these meetings, and these meetings continue for a large part of the 30th, as well as for the forenoon of the 1st of December, and Prime Minister leaves immediately after the summit concludes. But in the margins, and given the paucity of time, we are trying to schedule as many meetings or pull-asides as we can. And obviously, schedules of all the G20 members are tight. So we are trying to still figure out some meetings, and it's work in progress. What I can share with you at the moment is there is always in the margins of the G20 a meeting between the BRICS heads of state and government. That meeting is confirmed. The timing, I will not share timings with you today because I believe there will be a daily readout of the meetings which will take place. He will also be meeting the Secretary General of the United Nations. Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, has asked for a meeting with him, and he will be meeting the Secretary General of the United Nations. It's courtesy to meet the President of the host country, so there will be a meeting with the President of Argentina. There's a meeting with the new President of Chile, and this will be the fourth time, I believe, that Prime Minister will meet with President Xi Jinping of China. This was decided at the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg that there would be regular meetings, and so both countries were quite happy to accommodate this meeting in their schedules. There will be meetings with the Prime Ministers of Spain, of Jamaica, and Jamaica is not only in the bilateral capacity, but as the head of the CARICOM, the Caribbean community of countries, with the Netherlands, with the Chancellor of Germany, and as of now, possibly with the President of France. That is still being worked out. But one of the other meetings confirmed is with the President of a joint meeting with the President of the European Commission and the President of the European Council. As you know, there was to be, this year, we were to have an Indo-EU summit meeting, but for scheduling purposes, that could not be held. So this meeting is deemed important, and also given the changes that are taking place in the European Union. So as of now, these are the meetings which have been finalized. We are still in the process of finalizing some meetings. So if there is any further news tomorrow or on Thursday, the spokesman will be talking about it. In any case, we will be giving detailed briefings after all the major meetings from Buenos Aires. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is as much as I can share with you at the moment on the G20 summit.
Thank you, sir. Questions only on G20. Sridhar.
So, is there any bilateral plan with the US President, Donald Trump?
We are working on various bilateral meetings. At this stage, I'm only indicating those where the schedules of both have been synchronized. So,
Smita, and then Ranjit ji.
Just following with Sridhar's question, the fact is that PM actually hasn't met with President Trump since last June, and they've not even had a conversation, at least not a one reported to us, since February this year. Is there a particular reason why there's still no confirmation yet, maybe despite that opportunity being? And B, in terms of the US-China trade war, which is ongoing currently, there is a lot of buzz that maybe there could be some sort of an agreement announced between the two. While it's a bilateral issue, what's India's position really on how is India looking at the developments on that front?
Well, I've said what I had to on the bilateral meeting, so I won't comment further. As far as we have also seen reports that the United States and China are discussing some kind of a trade deal, to use the word that the United States uses. We are not aware of the facts in this matter. As I said, one of the issues that will be discussed is the WTO, whether and how it should be strengthened, what the reforms are. Our interest is is twofold. First, that the G20 is not hijacked by the single issue of trade. whether it is between two countries or otherwise. And secondly, how we can constructively reform the WTO in a manner that serves India's interests and which is multilateral. And I think that is going to be one of the focal points of this G20 meeting, or certainly of India's position at the G20 meetings.
Ranjit ji, and then Manish. We'll take 2 questions at a time.
Yeah. Issues like protectionism and unilateral economic sanctions are also creating disruptions in world economy, regional economies. So does India have concerns relating to these, and Prime Minister would be raising these issues during his interventions?
Manish.
Particularly reform of international financial institutions' economic architecture has been an abiding theme of G20. What's been the progress and what will be PM's pitch this time around, especially on issues such as tax evasion and base erosion and profit sharing, all that? Has there been any progress? What is our view on that?
Thank you. As far as the Ranjit ji, aapne jo kaha, that I think is going to be a major theme of this G20. And the Government of India's view is that we should look at this issue in a constructive manner. Pointing fingers may not necessarily achieve what we wish to achieve, which is a WTO in which our interests are protected and in which there is a rules-based order. So while we are concerned about the manner in which there is certain amount of unilateralism, our focus is going to be on the key phrase that Prime Minister has used and will continue to use, which is a reformed multilateralism. If the current multilateral system has any lacunae, or if there are issues that need to be addressed, let us work together as the G20 to reform that, but we need to keep a multilateral system in place. That, I think, is the basic approach that Prime Minister and his delegation will take at the G20.
Manish. Basically on the related questions, I think.
Financials. Yeah, on the financial issues, quite honestly, I would rather that my colleague who is the Secretary Economic Affairs would have commented on this, because he is far more familiar with these issues. Certainly on G20, on the taxation side, substantial progress has been made, substantial achievements have been made. I am not at any great, I'm not able to indicate as to whether any specific proposals are going to be made on the financial side. But certainly this is an area of our interest, and we will continue to follow that.
Manish, we will have a briefing, from Argentina, I think, and perhaps some of the questions which you will have raised might be answered there. Elizabeth and Srinjoy.
Sir, this is Elizabeth with Mint. I just had a question. You said a BRICS head of state meeting and another with President Xi Jinping. So basically there are 2 separate meetings, right?
Yes, there are 2 separate meetings. BRICS is with all 5 heads of state and government, and then there's a separate bilateral meeting with President Xi Jinping. Yes.
Srinjoy.
So in that bilateral meeting with Xi Jinping, what is on the agenda? What are the issues that India will bring up? And what do we expect the Chinese to bring up?
Well, I think the whole purpose of these meetings is to build a certain mutual trust and understanding in the relationship. And it was decided after their meeting in Wuhan that they would take the opportunity wherever and whenever they could meet to have meetings and to discuss issues that was on either leader's mind or which was of mutual concern. So at this stage, I will not go into the issues that they will discuss, but I think it is important to note that this will be the 4th meeting that the 2 leaders will have had in a space of perhaps 7 months or 8 months. And I think that in itself is indicative of the kind of political level exchanges and contacts that we have between China and India in post-Wuhan.
Yes, please. And then Mukesh.
So I'm Amity from Business Line. So you said that India's position at the G20 would be that, while the lacunae in the present multilateral system should be addressed, it should not be replaced by, unilateralism. So, but at present we see that, at the WTO, the US has been stalling the process by, stopping the election of judges at the dispute settlement body. And this is a big concern where a lot of countries have got together, including India, EU, a lot of others as well. So will this issue be taken up by India, or will we let the others do the talking and join them?
My understanding is that this issue is in the second session, where Prime Minister is not the lead. Prime Minister doesn't have the lead intervention. Prime Minister is the lead, has the lead intervention in the first session. So we presume that there are other leaders who might speak to the issue of international trade and finance, but Prime Minister is likely to intervene on this subject. Yes.
Mukesh?
Sir, who would be Sherpa for Prime Minister at G20? And secondly, you mentioned that he would be flagging issues for Jandhan, GST, Mudra Yojana. Would he also be talking about his massive economic reform, which was demonetization?
The Sherpa is Shri Shaktikant Das, who was former Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, and perhaps he was also the Finance Secretary. So he has been the Sherpa, and he has shepherded India through this entire G20 process. I've already listed out the topics that the Prime Minister is going to flag. I did miss out couple of important things he will also flag. One is his scheme on Ayushman Bharat, which is a substantial scheme on healthcare. This is one of the important issues actually going to be discussed at the G20. And the other important thing I think he will flag is also in terms of agriculture, the agriculture sector, the soil health card and initiatives to improve productivity. Beyond that, I'm not at liberty to comment on what other topics he may wish to speak or not. I'm sure you will learn of it after he's spoken.
So last two questions.
Yes.
Last two questions. And after that, Ian.
Sir, Thomas from Malayalam and Urma. See, what is on the agenda in the bilateral between the French president and the Prime Minister? Is there any plan to review the IGA on the fighter planes?
Did you see it?
No. I'm not at liberty at this stage to disclose what is on the agenda of any of the bilateral meetings. We will do a briefing as soon as the visits are, the meetings are done.
You see,
I will hold a briefing after the bilateral is over.
Normally, we do a briefing after the bilateral meetings have taken place. We will stick to that schedule. Once the meeting takes place, then we will brief you all. Ian, last question.
Hi, Ian from Bloomberg. I was just wondering if there were any plans to meet Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, and if there were any sort of ongoing talks about whether there was a possible meeting between Modi and the Crown Prince. Thanks.
Well, as I've said, I've already indicated which the meetings which have been fixed. Others are still in the pipeline, so we will let you know once they've been fixed, or if they've been fixed.
Maybe after this? On record? Okay. Last one.
So can we just have an exact chronology of the itinerary, which meeting will be on which day? We have not specified that.
See, that I'll share it with you. Okay. I mean, I have the program with me, I'll share it with you. Thank you, sir, and thank you all for joining. This concludes the special briefing on Prime Minister's visit for the G20 Summit.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.